Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. This video is going to show the current progress on the cliff project, which I mentioned in a previous video. I've been getting a lot of time in on it. It's all I've been doing lately. Besides techie stuff, but that's all actually been wrapped up now as well. So we're going to take a look at the cliff, show you all the sides that I've been working on, and there's a customer question at the end of that segment. And at the end of the video, I'm going to mention a couple things and maybe ask for quick help. There's an Indiegogo campaign out there I think maybe you might be interested in knowing, and maybe a small request on my part. So hopefully you'll stick it out to the end, or if you get bored midway through, you can jump to the end or skip it entirely. But because there's so much to talk about in this video, we should just get started and take a look at the cliff. So I thought before we take a look at the overall structure of the piece, we'd take a quick look at each of the sides, and that may explain some of the final comments that I'm going to make about this piece. So we'll take a look at the what I'm calling the blank side of the cliff, and what you'll notice is that there's no features here. Now, originally there were plans for a lava flow on this side, and after working on the lava flow on the final side I'm going to show you, on the fantasy side, I realized that this is far too much of a challenge to try to incorporate into two of the faces of this cliff. So instead, I decided to omit it on this side and just work on the rock texture, if you will. And in fact, this is the first side that I carved, and that gave me some understanding of how to carve this to try to give it a better rock texture. If I zoom in just a little bit here, take a little look at this. What I had tried to do originally was to carve it in such a way that I would have lots of little striations that would look like fractured rock. And once I did that, first I realized that's a lot of extra work to try to incorporate into this piece. And two, that it's likely to get filled by the final coats of foam coat that I'll be putting on this. If you haven't seen me talk about foam coat, there is a video in the Wayback Machine there. Take a look at that in the back finger. That will likely fill some of those smaller details. So instead what I've opted for is just a general rock shape, and left it fairly textured from the sculpting of the foam. And there's a video much more recent of showing me carving the foam. And that is the way I've been progressing with this piece. You will notice on this piece, this face here, that you see a little patching done right here. This is because I have been carving deeper and deeper into this piece in various areas for various reasons, and I started to actually breach into the interior. So what I've applied here, this is plaster cloth from Woodland Scenics. It's a plaster impregnated gauze. I mean, you can make this yourself in other ways, but anyway, I had a roll, so luckily I had it on hand so I could use it. And you dip it in water and you apply it, and it'll harden up nice and strong. So I've used that to patch some of the areas where I've been breaching into the interior. And of course, I'll have to come over this with some Sculptamold, which I've used in the past. Although if you're not a long-time viewer, I wouldn't say go and hunt back for that. Maybe I'll do, I don't know if I've ever done a review on Sculptamold. In any case, this will need to get covered up, but this side gave me some practice on the rock face texture, and that was kind of what I decided to use on the whole piece. Now, coming around to this side, you see, let's pan back just a little bit on that. This is what I'm calling the bunker side. These are designed to look like World War II bunker emplacements for, really, this is kind of a design used for large guns, large caliber weapons. But the customer wanted to have a World War II side that he could place figures into. Now, his figures are rather large. I showed them in a previous video. We'll see them again before this project is complete. But they're approximately 54 millimeters in size. I wanted him to be able to put them into the interior, so I had to leave a largish gap to allow the figures to be placed inside. But I did cut some slots here, mostly, partly to ease in figure placement, but also to give the impression that this could receive a large gun. We'll close up on that a little bit. Whoop, whoa, whoa. And then you can see that here. And you'll also notice that what I've done is I've done a stepped top and sides, and this is based on several photos that I noticed in research for this piece, and that is probably where we should go next. I'll take a look at these photos. So at this point, I'd actually be using Cam Studio so I could point to things with my cursor, but Cam Studio has been locking up on me today, and after 3 attempts, I'm going back old school and just overlaying audio. So hopefully you can see the things that I wanted to point out, but this is a bunker that was on Pointe du Hoc. Pointe du Hoc was the original idea for this project. It's a peninsula that had fortifications on it, and this fortification, you can see, has a stepped pattern, if you will, on the top and sides, and this was something I wanted to emulate in the bunkers that I built. One point of interest on that is that these angles on the steps are, if you look carefully, you'll see that there are 5 sides to the top pieces, right? So we see 3, and then there are 2 on the back. Those 5 sides are half of a decahedron, and without getting into too much geometry, it was a real trick for me to understand how to stack them the way I did, or the way they're shown here, and preserve the stepped sides as well. It took a little bit of practice, we'll just say that. In this second image, this shows another bunker, and while I didn't really draw on this very heavily, it did show, that there were large guns placed in them, and I took note that it has the interesting sort of cross cuts to allow the gun to swing wider, I'm assuming. But this does not have a very stepped down bottom plate, I guess we'll call it. And if you noticed in the previous video, there was a recessed area that went down below the actual ground level. And that was something I wanted to carry into the pieces as well, as have that recessed area below the outer wall. And in this last image, I just drew on this really quickly. Drew on this, get it? Draw and draw. But I wanted to take a look and see whether, how egress from these kinds of structures was made. Where are the doors, where are the openings? And if you can hear that in the background, that's George saying, why am I not playing with him? But very, very quickly, I did notice that there are doors usually at the back of the bunker, and also looking at the front, you'll see that the gun opening has a 30-degree angle, and of note, my bunkers ended up having a 30-degree angle or very close to it, and I think that's the result of actually doing that stepwise fashion of the top and having the staggered sides as a result of that. So that was kind of a fortuitous alignment, but clearly I need to add a door to the back of the bunker. So after taking a look at those photos and some of those concepts, you can see what I've tried to emulate here. And of course, after taking a look at the diagram of the bunker, I'll have to add a back to this, and I'll have to add a door to that as well. I have those pieces cut except for the door, so that should be relatively straightforward. The only caveat away from realism, caveat away. The only deviation, better word choice, away from the realism of the piece is that door will be kind of up close to the back of this, but I'm not about to try to extend this any further into the piece, and it's not really necessary for gameplay. These will sit about this far out from the facing of the cliff, and that will then get stitched in to the rock facing with some more sculpt mold, and I'll have to shape that to match the rock texture around it. That shouldn't be too difficult, and the subsequent coats of foam coat will seal that in and probably blend that texture a little bit better as well. Coming around to the third side, this is the pathway side where figures can move on foot to the top of the piece. And this piece has been modified from its original carving as well. the problem that I had was that the figures are rather large, and some of the fantasy figures are rather unstable that the customer sent me, meaning that their center of gravity is, they're a little tippy. And so what I did is I went back through and I really flattened a lot of these and also widened them a bit. And if we come in a little closer on this, I think you can see it just a little bit better. But, coming in across these paths, I had to really open them up to give room for a figure. And I wanted the figures to be able to stand on the steps coming up to some of the larger pathway areas. Originally, I thought about just having little scramble areas, if you will, that you couldn't actually move onto, but would merely, you'd appear somewhere higher after, a virtual movement over the rough ground. But that presents some problems in the sense that depending on where a figure is moving, depending on what the movement allowance is, you could end up partway up the Scrabble, and I think it would be better to have figure placement viable at any of the points along the way that you that are designated as part of the paths. In carving this piece, we'll pan back just a little bit on that, I wanted several pathways for the miniatures to access the top. I think it'll be more interesting for play and provides, more varieties of scenarios, so you could actually have, maybe defending troops on the pathway coming down and a clash coming up, something like that. So there are several pathways to the top, coming up this side, coming up here, they overlap, they join with two sort of egresses at the top to enter, the open flat top at the top here. That has pushed this top back a little bit to make that happen. You can see here, again, I carved a little too deeply into the foam. I'm carving so far back to widen these paths that I am breaching the center, so I had to put a little plaster cloth over this area as well. But I think this entire side is much more playable as a result of that, so that was a consideration in its design and a sacrifice in terms of the slope that I thought was a good trade-off. Coming around to the last side, this is the fantasy side, if you will, and this has the most complexity and features on it. This was originally designed to have that as well, so no surprises, but it has a tremendous amount of work incorporated into all of the pieces, as well as the layout to get them to all work together. Basically, to do a quick summary, and if you saw my original video, I had spray paint, marking some of these spots. There are three emplacements where the customer wanted to be able to have archers, be able to fire down onto miniatures, entering the door, crossing the bridge, walking up the pathway. The customer also wanted a lava flow that would end up underneath the walkway here. I'm going to call this a bridge/walkway. And that lava flow needed to, so then it needed to extend out from this piece. And if you remember this side, I had built this side out more, and knowing that I'd have to have room for all of these pieces. In the layout of this, however, I began to realize that one of the driving forces was this platform here, and maybe a little quick close-up on that might help. This platform really, and I'm going to count this as an error on my part. I think if I had built this out so that it hung about here instead of here, I wouldn't have had to push some of these elements back as far as I needed to. Because the customer requested this platform to be an overhang so that there would be space underneath it, which I thought was a great idea. I think aesthetically it works really well. I had to push this back here. And because it was here, put the door in this spot, which is a little, wait a minute, which is a little bit close to the top of this. And we're going to talk about some of the problems that's creating at the top in a few minutes. But in any case, that has forced the layout. This particular platform drove this entire side. And that determined the bridge placement, which determined the lava flow placement. And then one of the other considerations is the customer requested that there be an arch room placement on this side of the door, knowing that it would be on the corner of this side, and that restricted some of the carving that could occur here. So that's the layout reasoning here, and doing a quick overview of some of the key pieces. Let's start with the carving that I've done here, and we can come in real close on this. Let's do that, and we can start. Oh, let me make a little tripod adjustment. Let's start. There we go. Let's do that. You can see that what I've done here is I've used balsa foam, and I've done some embossing on this piece. And the embossing allows me to have that texture come, proud from the surface, which I think looks much better. I think it's different from what people traditionally do, which is to carve into the foam, and allowed me to do more complex patterns than I could easily do if I was going to carve into it with, say, a X-Acto blade or a hot wire engraver. The Hot Wire Foam Factories engraver is what I typically use. And so this allowed me to do some more ornate carving, and you can see it on the doorway here. And I wanted to use Celtic patterns so that it would have a dwarvish feel, what the customer was referencing, but also be a little more generic. He has elven troops as well, so it could fit sort of any race. I wanted it to feel a little bit more generic. The balsa foam is great because you can carve it relatively easily, but with this level of detail, it was a little time consuming, but I think the effect is sort of worth it, as you can really see the Celtic knot pattern much more clearly, and it's got a nice deep cut, which I think really brings that texture to the front. You'll notice also that I did do some carving into the foam. I did it here on the door, and I also did it on the emplacement doorways as well. Now, I've never tried this with this camera before, so we'll see if it'll do a focus. It probably, there we go. I need to fill the frame. And so what I did is I got a little nervous about the variations of the patterns, in the sense that I don't want it to look like some jumbled mess of different patterns all just thrown together. So I tried to come up with a scheme whereby the outer side and the emplacements have the sort of rigid, squared Celtic knot pattern. And then on the doors, I have a softer, more curved pattern to contrast that and just bring it a little bit more interest. It's an aesthetic decision I made, and so I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but that's the one that I called. I thought that with this door being a large, flat face, that a large emblem on it would make it really stand out and give it a little bit more interest and break up that large opening, that large, I should say, blank surface. And you'll notice here that I've filled this in with some lightweight spackle, and that's because when I carved this, I used the hot wire engraver. And in order to get a deeper cut, I had to continuously go over some of those lines, and that left the interior of the carving, very melted looking and textured and whatnot. Because I didn't want that to be the final appearance, I just skimmed it with a little bit of lightweight spackle in order to fill some of that texture and give it a slightly smoother interior. It's still going to have a little bit of texture when I paint it, but I think that's going to work all right. The last thing I should mention about the door before we leave it is I wanted to have a different method of opening it from what I've done in the past, and for two reasons. One, it adds a little bit of nice variety, and two, if I have the doors swinging, because of the way the door is cut and the thickness of this entrance, I'd either have to bring the doors forward, or if they were going to swing inside, I'd have to bring the doors back, which I didn't want to do. If I bring them forward, when they swing open, they're actually going to swing quite wide on this platform, and that is going to knock off people if they're standing there. So instead, I decided to opt for something I've never tried before, which is to have a sliding door. So I built guides on the sides of the door. You can see a little edge of that peeking here. And then build runners, and then I can have the door slide in and out. Now you'll notice these little emblems at the bottom. That is a stop to keep the door from opening so far that it actually goes beyond the edge of this, and then you wouldn't be able to close it again. And once this is all sealed up, that would be a done deal. So I put these little emblems in here, again, with a little bit of a curved iconography to give it not a door handle look. I didn't want to have a door handle look per se, but I did want to have something you could grab relatively easily. The doors are going to have stops on the other side as well, so that you can't bring them too far to one side, because again, you could take them too far, and then that would, they'd pop out of the track or something like that. The only problem with the door that I was actually fairly disappointed with, and it was just a little oversight on my part, is that when the door is centered, the line of the center of the door does not match the emblem at the top. This emblem is slightly off-center, and I don't know why I didn't double-check that before I carved it, but that's the result. So there's going to be just a tiny off-centering there. As you know, it bugs me a lot, but I'm not recarving all of this to fix that. So before we leave this side, we should just talk about this walkway and the projected lava flow. This walkway the customer wanted it to flow. The customer wanted it to extend over the lava, and maybe we should make a little tripod change here. Let's do that, and then we can come back in close here. There we go. And the lava flow, so as I said, the platform dictated the placement of the walkway, which dictated the placement of the lava flow. The lava extends, this is lava, it's going to be, we'll talk about that in a second, extends a couple inches to this side of the walkway, and the customer wanted the walkway to be single file for individuals coming across it. Sort of off of the Mines of Moria scene where Gandalf is confronting the Balrog. And so if you take a look at those photos, and I'll show you a couple photos right now. So taking a look at this first photo, the epic battle between the two characters here, if you actually look at the walkway itself, you can see that it's single file. And also one thing that I noticed is that it's not constructed of individual blocks or anything of the sort. It appears to be single carving out of complete stone. And taking a look at the second photo here, this is a little bit more of what I was going for when I originally designed the bridge/walkway. And I became concerned about it, and I'll talk more about that in a second, about its level of detail or lack thereof. And looking at these, I realized there's very little detail on these, meaning that they're all single pieces of stone. The only detail that I noticed that helps to break that up, of course, there's the stairs themselves, and of course the broken areas, but we'll put the broken areas aside for a second, is that the ends or the pillars of this are embedded in the stone itself. The stone sort of creeps up and is entrapping the ends of this walkway, or perhaps they've been carved directly out of it. It's not clear, of course, but that is an embellishment to the overall look that I think is all that I need for the main piece. So this is what I've been using for an inspiration for that. You can see that, as I mentioned, that there's a very smooth stonework. Now, I was a little nervous about that because I felt like there's so much detail in all these pieces. I felt compelled to add more detail to this walkway, but I decided that first it would be very difficult because of the sort of shape that I've carved to add something to it that would look right. And I also realized that because there are some large open flat areas on these pieces, the doors are relatively flat and clean, that I could have a flat and clean area on the walkway as well. And I think once I build this into the cliff, this will get built up around the footing. It'll get built up and joined to the top of the platform and built up and joined around the base of the stairs, that stonework coming around the piece and firmly embedding it into the cliff will add enough detail to it that I think it will work all right. Lastly, before we leave this close-up, is to talk a little bit about the lava. The lava is designed, and if you've been following this project, my goal is to have light coming through the lava so that it would look illuminated. And these tracks are my illumination tracks. They are a diffuser with a little bit of a channel underneath so that I can put the lights underneath it, have that come through the diffuser, and flood the lava so that it glows. My original idea was to have pulsing lava lighting, I should say, so that it kind of looks like it's, got a little more going on. But what I discovered is that the lights that I used in the internal passageway are not bright enough to light the lava. For those of you who are interested in LEDs, those are the ones I'm using are Minims, which come from, I purchased them from SparkFun. They have a rating of 6,000 microcandelas, MCDs. I believe that's what that stands for. And even putting in, one for every, say, square inch and a half, that is not enough light to come through the lava based on the way I'm painting it. I wanted the lava to look good, both painted and lit and unlit. Right? We're not going to always have the lights on, and I wanted it to look good for that. And sometimes we're going to be lighting it, and I wanted it to look good then as well. That actually was really difficult, and we're going to come to the lava in another video and talk about that more. But just suffice it to say, I spent 5 hours painting the lava for this spot, and it took me that long, not even to do the finished piece, but to do the testing for the color scheme. So, I think the color scheme is right now, but I need more light coming through these. It would certainly be nice to have some light coming up and illuminating the bottom of this walkway and indirectly shining onto it. I don't know if I can achieve that at this point, but that's a goal of mine. So I've got some ultra bright LEDs coming. One of them is a 220,000 microcandela LED. I don't even know if that's possible. That's what it says. So I'm going to try and throw a lot of light under that and see if we can make something happen. So I'm going to be casting this lava as a single piece using a smooth-on Vitaflex, and I'm going to do a detailed video of that casting process in the near future, so you get to see that eventually down the road. So that will come down, and then I will be back filling all of these areas in with a Sculptamold and bringing this seamless to overlap slightly the lava flow so you won't see these edges, and then that will hopefully tie it all together and give it a really nice effect when it's done. So one thing I want to ask the customer about before we leave this piece is what to do about the top. Very simply, the customer requested originally that there be room on the top for a large castle piece that he has. The original idea was to have it be 24 inches square, flat area on the top. I originally designed it to have 10 inches in the front, extending out, so that people coming up the top could sort of mass themselves. And what has happened is that in order to achieve a natural curve to these corners, which, to be honest, has been a real challenge. In fact, I've removed so much material to achieve that, it makes me feel like I probably should have built it about 30% larger than it was to make that happen. In order to get these corners kind of rounded and natural, not looking at the top, all right, we're just looking at the sides here, that has really shrunk the available, it's impacting, I should say, encroaching would be a better word, on this top area. And now hopefully it shows from that angle, I believe it does, you'll see that I've marked out the 24-inch spot, and you can tell I don't have a lot of room left to work. I have some room in the front here, and I think it would be, probably reasonable to sacrifice the flat area to, which is now markedly reduced in any case. So I have room in the front here, and I have, I have a little bit of corner space here to bring it in. But in the back, I'm really tight for space, and it's ending up with a very linear edge. At the top surface, which really detracts from, more of a natural look. Now, this corner linear appearance is most noticeable from a top angle. Now, this piece is, 24, 25 inches high, and if it's up on a table that is 4 inches, if it's up on a table that's, say, 36 inches high, right, you're looking at this being about 5 feet tall at this point. And so you're not going to necessarily see it from that angle, and it won't be quite as strong visually. But if I had my druthers, and I think it's, on my part, an error on my part in the initial planning of this, I haven't done anything quite like this before, so lessons learned, I would like to knock off some of this top so that I can create a little bit more of a natural appearance, overall to the final upper, 10% of the piece. So really it's going to be the customer's call at this point on what he would like me to do going forward. If I have, a couple inches really, if I could bring this down to say a 22 by 22, I think that would be enough to allow me to add some variation, knock off these corners, bring this in, and give it a little bit more of a natural feel at the top. So that I wanted to mention that and get a little feedback from the customer on that, as it was really only revealing itself to me as I was getting more and more, doing more and more work on the sides, carving it more and more, and realizing, I'm running out of space here. And in order to get these corners to not look, I mentioned before, I do not want the pyramid look for this, and you can still see, even from this angle, I'm really fighting that look. But you can see in the back corner there that I was able to sort of shape it in a way to knock off that real sharp edge corner look. And this front has the most prominent sort of trapezoid appearance, partly because I needed the space for all of the pathways. That could be knocked down a little bit. But this side also presents its own challenge because the archer emplacements, to have them spaced out, meant that I had to really preserve some of this material on these corners to achieve that. So what's the minimum I need to leave at the top? That's the real question. So that gives you a look at all of the cliff work that has been done. There's still a fair amount of work to do, and I need to wrap it up in a week and a half, I think, by my current estimates. So I have to really continue working pretty hard on it. All of those elements that I've mentioned, the bunker and the doors and the emplacements and all of that, I'm going to actually embed them in the cliff first, paint all the stonework, and then paint them. One or the other needs to get painted first. Cliff for the pieces. And I think painting the pieces first, and then putting them into the cliff, and then spackling around them and painting the rock around them is going to be very risky in terms of not getting paint on them. I'd rather just do all the stonework and then just pick them out individually where they are. So I think that's going to work out better. So wish me luck on that. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I thought you might be interested in knowing Greenleaf Terrain is running an Indiegogo campaign to try to generate some funds for some new gear for his video shooting. And he does some really nice work, and I think it's worth checking out. So I'll put a link in the description to his Indiegogo, and you should check out his channel, of course, first if you haven't seen it, and think about whether that's something you might want to support. Also, it reminds me that I watch a lot of terrain channels, as many as I can find that are, good quality, show or talk about what kind of work is being done. Certainly commercial channels if I can find them, but some, amateur channels as well. So what I thought I would do is, let's see here, I'll lean, is I'll show you some of the channels that I'm currently watching, and if you see a channel that you watch that I'm missing, something really, great quality, awesome creativity, good explanations, anything like that, let me know. I would like to check it out. And I think if you have not checked out these channels, you should check them out yourself as well, because there's a lot of variety in terrain out there, a lot of different ways to approach things creatively. And, there's a lot of room in the market, as I always say, because everybody's got a different style. So hopefully I've pointed you out to something of interest to you. And if you know something I should be interested in, point it out to me. Questions and comments down below, always welcome. Please understand one of the things I've mentioned is the new YouTube comment section, and I have discovered it is possible for me to miss a reply to a comment. I'll get the reply notification in my Gmail, but when I go to the comments, it will not move to the top. And sometimes if there's a lot of comments, I'm not willing to scroll through 50 or 60 or 70 comments to try to find it. So I may miss those, but otherwise I seem to be getting them all, so there's just a little FYI. Keep an eye on the channel. I will be back as soon as I can get a good chunk of this work done on the cliff, so we may have one more work in progress video before it's done, and hopefully you'll come back and join me for that. So I'll talk to you soon.